Hello, my name is Daniel, and I want to tell you a story. But this isn't just any story, it's the story of how I learned English in a way that completely changed my life. And if you listen carefully, maybe you'll find a way to improve your English too. I wasn't always good at English. In fact, for most of my life, I had problems with it. I knew the basics, of course. I could say my name, ask simple questions like how are you, or where's the bathroom, but that was all. Every time I tried to have a real conversation, my brain would stop working. I knew the words, but I couldn't put them together fast enough. It felt like there was a big wall between me and the English language, and no matter how much I studied, I couldn't break it. But everything changed one summer when I made a decision that changed the way I learned. It all started with a book. I still remember the day I found it. I was walking through a small bookstore in my city when I saw an old, dusty book sitting on a shelf. The title caught my attention. It was in English. At that time, I couldn't understand the whole title, but I recognized a few words. I picked it up, looked at the pages, and saw that the story was written in simple English. Not too easy, but not too difficult either. Something inside me told me to buy it. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was instinct, I don't know, but I bought the book, took it home, and that night, I did something I had never done before. Instead of studying grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists, I just read. At first, it was hard. I had to stop every few sentences to look up words. I kept a small notebook next to me, and every time I found a new word, I wrote it down. I didn't just write the meaning, I wrote the whole sentence so I could remember how the word was used. I read slowly, sometimes reading the same paragraph 3 or 4 times. But then, something amazing happened. One night, as I was reading, I realized that I had finished an entire page without stopping to translate anything. I understood it. I didn't know how, but I did. The words that once felt difficult and strange now felt normal. They made sense. And that's when I discovered the secret to learning English: stories. Reading stories wasn't just helping me learn new words, it was helping me understand how English works, the way sentences were made, the way certain phrases were used, the rhythm of the language. It was all coming together in my mind without me even trying. So, I kept going. Every day, I read a little more. I read different kinds of stories, short stories, adventure stories, even fairy tales, and something incredible started to happen. One day, I was walking home from work when I saw a group of tourists. They were looking at a map, confused. One of them turned to me and asked, "Excuse me, do you know how to get to the train station?" For a moment, I panicked. The old me would have frozen, my mind running fast to find the right words. But this time, something was different. Without thinking, I answered, "Yes, it's just down this street. Walk straight for about 5 minutes, and you'll see it on your right." I said it naturally, without stopping, and the best part? They understood me, they smiled, said thank you, and walked away. I stood there for a moment, surprised. I had just spoken English, real English, in a real conversation, and it had felt easy. That's when I realized, I wasn't just reading stories, I was absorbing the language. I was training my brain to think in English without even trying. So I took it a step further. I started listening to audiobooks while reading at the same time. I would listen to a native speaker read the story while following along with the text. This helped me connect the words to their pronunciation. It also helped me understand spoken English better. Then, I started telling the stories to myself in my own words. Every time I finished a chapter, I would put the book down and try to explain what had happened, out loud, in English. At first, I made mistakes, a lot of mistakes, but I didn't stop. I kept going. And then, the biggest surprise happened. One night, I had a dream, but it wasn't just any dream, it was in English. In my dream, I was in a cafe, ordering coffee. The waiter asked me what I wanted, and I answered in English, without thinking, without translating, just speaking naturally. When I woke up, I couldn't believe it. My brain had started processing English on its own. That's when I knew I had truly learned the language. After that, everything became easier. Conversations didn't scare me anymore. I could watch movies without subtitles and understand them. I could write messages in English without thinking about every word. And all of this happened because of stories. Stories are powerful. They don't just teach you words, they teach you how to use them. They help you think in English, feel the language, and most importantly, enjoy the learning process. So if you're struggling with English, if you feel like you're stuck, I want to tell you this: stop thinking of English as something you have to study. Instead, experience it. Read stories, listen to them, imagine yourself inside them, live the language. Because when you do that, something incredible happens. English stops being a subject in a textbook and becomes a part of you. It becomes natural, easy, just like it did for me. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll find yourself speaking English fluently. You'll have conversations without fear. You'll understand people without needing subtitles. You'll wake up one morning, maybe after a dream in English, and you'll realize, I did it. I learned English, asterisk. And that will be the moment everything changes. But my journey didn't stop there. Learning English through stories was just the beginning. Once I realized how much I had improved, I became even more curious. I wanted to see how far I could go, how much more I could understand, how natural English could feel. So, I decided to challenge myself. Instead of just reading stories, I started watching them. Movies, TV shows, cartoons, anything that told a story in English. At first, I used subtitles, just like I did with books. I would watch a scene, read the subtitles, and try to connect the words to the sounds. But soon, I realized that my brain was getting lazy. I was reading more than I was listening. So I turned off the subtitles. That first time watching a movie without subtitles was difficult. I only understood half of what they were saying, maybe even less. But instead of feeling frustrated, I tried something new. I focused on the story. I watched the characters' expressions, their actions, the way they spoke, and little by little, my brain started to fill in the gaps. I didn't need to understand every single word to understand the meaning. I remember watching a movie where two friends were having an argument. I didn't understand every sentence, but I could feel their emotions. One was angry, the other was sad. The words weren't as important as the story itself. That's when I realized that English isn't just about grammar or vocabulary, it's about communication. It's about expressing emotions, ideas, and thoughts in a way that others can understand. From that moment on, I stopped worrying about knowing every word. Instead, I focused on understanding the message, and something amazing happened. I started recognizing phrases that I had seen in books. Words and expressions I had read before now made sense when spoken. My brain was connecting everything, and English was becoming a part of me. One day, I decided to take another step. Instead of just listening and reading, I wanted to speak. But I had a problem. I had no one to talk to. My friends didn't speak English, and I was too nervous to talk to strangers, so I found another way. I started talking to myself. Yes, it sounds strange, but it worked. Every morning, I would look in the mirror and talk about my plans for the day. Today, I'm going to work. After work, I'll buy some groceries. Maybe I'll watch a movie tonight. It was simple, but it helped me think in English. Then, I started telling myself stories. I would take a book I had read and retell it in my own words. Once upon a time, there was a young boy who found a magic ring. I would speak out loud, pretending I was telling the story to someone else. At first, I made mistakes, but I didn't stop. I just kept going. One day, something unexpected happened. I was at a coffee shop, sitting alone, when a tourist sat next to me. He looked at me and said, "Excuse me, do you know a good place to eat around here?" For a second, my heart started beating fast, but then, something amazing happened. I just answered, without thinking, without translating, without fear. "Yes, there's a really good restaurant 2 streets away. They have great food, and the prices are good." He smiled, thanked me, and left, and I sat there, realizing what had just happened. I had spoken English, naturally, easily, confidently. That moment changed everything for me. I understood that I was ready. From then on, I started looking for more opportunities to speak. I joined online communities, had conversations with native speakers, and even made friends who only spoke English. The more I spoke, the more confident I became, and soon, I realized that I had done it. I had learned English, not just in theory, not just in my mind, but in real life. And it all started with a simple book. So if you're listening to this, if you're struggling with English, if you feel like you'll never be fluent, I want you to remember my story. Learning a language isn't about memorizing rules or studying textbooks. It's about living the language. Surround yourself with stories. Listen to English, read in English, speak English, even if it's just to yourself. Because one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up and realize that English is no longer difficult. It's no longer something you're learning. It's something you know. And that will be the moment everything changes.